particularly related to cost, risk, and schedule in terms of the importance of project services to the success of a project during each of the phases of the project life cycle. Right here. Like I said, my name is Rob Heidenreich. I've worked with Taryn and Chris before. I'm doing consulting right now with them and some other companies. I'm a retired Marine infantry officer, did over 20 years in the Marine Corps, and now have about 10 years of upstream oil and gas experience, where I did project management for large subsea systems projects. Really, it was kind of a combination of product management, project management, and operation. My task was to reduce the large backlog that had built up over about a 2.5-year period that we had a high-level overview of project management, the life cycle, the 5 phases, and touch on some keys to success, like I said, particularly related to what PE4U does in terms of cost, risk, and schedule. We have represented here today, is it predominantly oil and gas, or is there any other industries?
Predominantly oil and gas. Predominantly.
The ladies over here are hotel managers.
What's that?
Ladies over here are hotel.
Hospitality.
Project planning, project execution, product performance monitoring, and project closeout. I'll go through each one of these phases. High level, and we'll talk about some of the keys to the size of the organization, the number of projects, and how they execute, the availability of resources. But really, this is where we're building a business case on should we be able to execute this project. Upper management kind of design this, like I said, right around 30 minutes, allow for comments and discussion. All right, keys to success for project conception and initiation. Where is my order? I wanted to read it. I wanted to know what I was responsible for. So, and I threw that up here because I didn't know what other industries. That may not be the case in every project you do. It may not be an external project. It could be internal. What you've agreed to with the client. In relation to cost, risk, and schedule, you need to understand. In the case of a subsea project, you need to understand what you're selling your equipment for. And what are the basis of those costs? How I think it's key to get that transition, because I know as a project manager, I stepped in and said, here's the contract. I had no part in writing it or building it. And, you have a lot of questions about, particularly they've done a really good risk review and started a risk register at a high level that you can build on throughout the life of the project. And I'll come back to this later, but right now, the keys here is you're to somebody put him on it. That way, if we get the award, he's there, he's built this plan, he can take it right in, take the contract, take the PID, and go into the next phase, which we'll talk about is the project planning and development of the project management. Someone signed it, now I've got to execute it. Now what I need to be able to do is turn that into my project management plan. All right? I've got to dig into that to determine what are the activities that I must accomplish, the scope of work, what is the scope of supply that I must own that margin, and now you're going to be responsible for this P&L statement for the life of the project, which is key when you come to closing. And again, it's nice as a project manager to begin this phase with a really good one. But really where we fall short is when we start looking into the key functional areas and drawing in subject matter experts to really dive into risk as it relates to your cost and schedule. It's key. But another key here is your project organization and the roles and responsibilities. You've got to have all the resources you need. So when you look at your costs, you look at your schedule, it's key that you got to be somebody that is a very strong leader that knows how to navigate in an organization like that, because you're leading people that, on some days, depending on their personality, say, hey, I don't report and saying, what did we plan for? As I developed as a project manager and then became a director of project management in our manifold group, I was running not only 2 project management groups, then we added, in the Marine Corps we call it the 5 S's, which is your who, what, when, where, the why, and our concept execution was the how. So, and you're gonna start talking about your objectives. We talked about scope of supply, scope of work. Like I said, I kind of get ahead of myself. We're going in there and start talking things. The key is this project management plan. In relation to my background, this key is that I understood that contract. And I built that project. Maybe on this contract, I jumped into a project towards the end. And of course, now it was time to close out and make sure everything delivered. I just jumped in. So, I'm scrambling around trying to get a copy of the contract and find out what am I being operation order and holding yourself and say, okay, I got all the information. You guys just follow me. No, you distribute that operations order to your subordinate commanders, and they do the same until the PFC private.
In reality, the better dissemination of information, the better you are at making decisions, and no one raise the flag. So, keep all the calls, yeah, I found the numbers, here are the numbers. But if you don't know when to raise the flag, then.
And one thing I've learned before, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in the Marine Corps was from a Lance Corporal in my first platoon. I was trying to get things done, and I was trying to do everything myself as a second lieutenant. I tell you what, it made a world of difference. That day I learned that not only do you have to lead and hold your people accountable, but you have to give them power. You got to give them information. You can't just say, follow me. Quality manager on the team that has done, I don't know, maybe he's been in the company for 20, 30 years, and he's seen multiple projects. So someone like that to me is just as valuable.
Any organization.
But that's the responsibility and challenge of being the project manager and leaders, bring that team together, leverage your strengths, understand your weaknesses, and go from there. But anyhow, back to project planning. So, all the engineering documents are done, and you execute. So, if you can't do an engineering design freeze at that point, you need to plan it in as part of the project management plan to say that on this date or in this time frame, you're gonna bust your budget, or you're gonna miss your schedule. So it is a risk to not have a design freeze. Next slide, please. All right, back to people and work. Make sure it's assigned to somebody. If you got scope of work that's not assigned to somebody, then everybody's going to assume that someone else is doing it. So make sure that that's well defined within your project management plan. Write an op order, come up with. Now, at one point we had 13 to 17 packages between $500 and $700 million. And I wanted to know on each project who's responsible for this part of the budget. I want someone done, and that's what they're focused on. But if you don't give them the power to understand what their cost is or their budget is, how can you track their costs? Because they're not tracking it if you don't give it to them. A good day one budget that you understand. In a lot of cases, it's probably been handed over to you, so you got to do due diligence. Get your subject matter experts that you need. Go sit down with the people that built that. Change management. I want to talk about schedule a bit, make sure it's realistic. We'll touch on that a little bit more here in a second. All the required activities, transitions. When I got into drilling and going to NDE that same day, there's physical movement. There's probably going to be a backlog waiting at the NDE. So trying to account for where your bottlenecks are in your schedules. Going back to risk, if you've looked under good from vendors, etc. And we started hitting on-time delivery. So it's key to get into the details. All right? Yes?
Speaking of details, planning, you talked about, that's why it's important to have an interaction.
Okay, understanding the contract. Everybody needs to know what their role is, but at the same time, everybody needs to understand the big picture. If you don't understand your big picture, then how does your specific role relate to mission accomplishment at the end of the day? Every meeting. Have one, make sure it's quick. Probably this is where you review the minutes of the meetings and talk about actions, who's responsible for what, as it relates to the work breakdown structure and the scope of work. Plan for individual meetings.
And that's not necessarily the case. A good project manager knows how to differentiate and how to delegate those certain type of roles, those certain type of tasks, and have the right people in the right meeting. I mean,
Okay, key to all this, risk review. sure you got it from, the PID, the initiation team, hopefully they did a good job. But this, and again, how it relates to the project management plan and the contract. Understanding the big picture, understanding how your subject risks relate to that big picture. Organizing your key elements, your deliverables, and it depends on what you're doing. In our case, it would have been geographically by plant. You know, we got to deliver the project, and maybe 1.1 was a plant that was making trees and connectors, and underneath that 1.1.1 was the tree, 1.1.2 were the connectors, and so forth. The next plant, you know, breaking it out. That is a way to do it. There's other ways to do it. It could be by type, function, geographic location. All right? But make sure this is key up front because we're going to build into your schedule. Talk about understanding cost. You need to be able to look at these and say, what are the costs for those? The work breakdown structure. And kind of relates back again, if you get everybody in there and they understand their work breakdown structure, where they fit into this, then you start talking about risk as it relates to this. Next slide, please. Okay, this is scheduled, taking the work breakdown structure and start lining out your key deliverables and the activities and relations of activities. Can they both start at the same time, or does one have to start after the other? Is it start to start, start to finish, finish to start? And start building your schedule in this format. I think the next slide is a Gantt schedule, where you start looking at really what does it look like and start doing the key. Remember we talked about is the baseline schedule of what you plan to do, and then keeping a progress / forecast along with that.